Hello again, BlizzCon. We were just here. Deja vu. Okay, well, as you probably already know, we're here to talk about the talent system, all the new stuff that we've done with it, and to give you guys a sneak peek at what we've done with your class. So let's open this vault of knowledge. Or vault of idiocy, whatever, you know. All right, so Talents 2.0. We spent a little bit of time talking about this in the preview panel, the World of Warcraft, Mists of Pandaria preview panel. But now we'd like to go into more depth, talk a little bit more, recap some of the philosophies, that sort of stuff, and then make our way through all the different classes. So, as you may realize by now, this represents a major change to the class talent trees. And it's really kind of a new phase of development for our talent system. The Cataclysm talent system was still very similar in a lot of ways to the original talent system, but we had these ideas in the back of our mind kind of, squeaking around that were telling us that we had bigger, better things to do with it. So the goal here is that you're standing next to another combat rogue, for example, and this combat rogue has different talents than you do. Whoa, wouldn't that be something? Holy crap. And they're not just an idiot, right? So, as I said before, character customization was the original point of talents in the first place. That's what we set out to do back in 2004, somewhere around, I don't know, I think it was around April or May of 2004 when we were talking about this. And that's what we kind of thought we were going to accomplish. But, over time, we've really seen that cookie-cutter builds have dominated the scene. And players have told us, we want more talent customization. We did the Cataclysm talent revamp with that kind of idea in mind, hoping to give players, more meaningful choices than they had before. But, really, while we made some improvements to how clean the system is and all that sort of thing, we still don't really feel like we delivered it on a level that players would really be happy with. So, time to do it over. So this new model is all about customization, making choices that are interesting and difficult choices. And so, when you look at a class now, the class is really going to be comprised of three things. And the first, of course, is your core class abilities. And these are abilities that are available to everybody of that character class, whether or not you're, arms or protection or fury, to take the warrior for an example. So all warriors obviously learn heroic strike. It's like that today. It'll continue to be like that in this case. We also have spec abilities, and this is something that we're doing a lot more with than we did before. The spec abilities in today's game, as with Cataclysm, are just that one ability that you get, like Mortal Strike for picking arms. But now it translates into quite a few new things. And that can include abilities that are either currently core abilities, if they only make sense to really work out for a certain spec, or they could be old talents, or they could be the existing abilities that we have now. So in this case, for the warrior example, only arms warriors will be able to learn Slam. And finally, we have talents. And any warrior can pick from the same sets of talents. Now, what's very important to us is that players are making apples-to-apples comparisons about their talent choices, right? One of the things that we've learned over time is that if you put let's say, a survivability ability up next to a DPS ability, and you are playing a DPS, role, for example, let's say you're an arms warrior, which one are you more likely to pick? I wonder. I think I'll have to take the DPS ability. And that really saps the actual reality of choice from the decision. However, what we feel like is if we present you with three different options that are apples-to-apples comparisons, for example, three different survivability abilities, and say, here they are, here's three of them, they're all cool in different ways, pick one, then there's only so wrong you can go with that, right? It becomes more of a choice of your style of play, what abilities appeal to you more as a player, and those choices can really actually add up to create a very different character once you look at your character overall. If we have DPS abilities in there, they'll be, compare it against other DPS abilities. So you'll be picking one of 3 different DPS abilities, or utility abilities, or mobility abilities, or survivability, all that kind of stuff. So in this case, it's crowd control. Throwdown would be put up against 2 other crowd control abilities. So you'd have to pick, well, which style of crowd control suits you best. So here are a bunch of different warrior core abilities. Many of you are probably very familiar with these. Of note, Enrage is in there. So that's an example of a really significant talent for warriors that we don't want it to just go away. It's kind of a cool mechanic and all that. But now all warriors are going to have the passive Enrage. And at level 10, you'll still choose your spec. And so here's the warrior example. The warrior's going to choose between Arms, Fury, and Protection. And that's going to have a whole bunch of implications. So if you're the Fury warrior, here are the abilities that you would get at the different levels. And so that implies that these aren't necessarily abilities that you would get as arms or as protection. There may be a little bit of overlap when it's necessary and when it makes sense, but for the most part, these are very distinct. Like Flurry, for example. Because before, you didn't want to be that warrior that didn't pick Flurry, right? That wasn't really a choice, not if you were sane. So at level 15, you'll pick your first talent. And in this particular example, you're looking at the warrior and you're comparing 3 different mobility abilities against each other. Do I want Juggernaut? Do I want Double Time, which essentially allows you to use a charge twice in a row? Or do I want the Warbringer ability? So you're going to pick which mobility ability, in this case, makes the most sense for your character and your style of play and the things that you do. This guy picked Warbringer. And we'll continue to go through all these different examples with the different character classes in a moment. So some of the other philosophies that go along with this are that it gives you access to stuff that you could never really access before in terms of the combinations, right? So in the past, if you were, let's say you're a rogue, and let's say you've chosen subtlety, well, you kind of know that, well, I'm going to get Shadow Step as a subtlety rogue, and I'm going to have, preparation, I'm going to have that sort of thing. But you were never really able to combine an ability like that with an ability, let's say, like Killing Spree. And because these different talents are now going to be able to play against each other in the same tree, you'll be able to create all kinds of new combinations of the cool talents that there already are in the game that are really meaningful in ways that you never could before. And really, that's at the crux of giving you guys a lot more control over your character, a lot more flexibility, and a lot more customization. Yeah! We'll also be adding several new overpowered feeling talents. So there's going to be new stuff in the different trees that you've never seen before. Also bear in mind as we go through these trees, as Greg said in the past, which is that don't make assumptions about the talents that you see in there in terms of how they operate today. A lot of these talents, once they're in this kind of system, they will change in terms of their cooldown or their duration or some of the details of their effects. That's because they aren't necessarily all layered on top of each other. In the past, we've had to essentially gimp some abilities because we had to worry about, first you can gouge the guy, and then you could kidney punch him, and then you could, blind him, and then you can do this, that, and the other. And when you layer all those mechanics on top of each other, we actually end up in a situation where sometimes we have to marginalize those abilities more and more. And so in a lot of cases, this opens up a lot of flexibility for us that we didn't have. And so as we're going through these also, if you don't see a beloved talent, don't worry. It's probably something we just gave to your spec or as a core ability or something like that. This is definitely, there's not an intent here to take away a whole bunch of awesome stuff. We're moving things around and putting them in places where they actually make for interesting choices. An example, all holy priests now have Circle of Healing. Woohoo! And hopefully you'll come away with this not feeling like they're mandatory talents. And every choice should be hard but fun. Screenshot time. So rather than disappointing everybody by just walking off the stage, we're now just going to go through every freaking talent. So, Greg, take it away.
We're going to iterate a lot of these individual talents. Obviously, these are not set in stone. You guys haven't even played them yet. Don't get too obsessed about the numbers or, oh my god, 2-minute cooldown, that's OP. We can get to all that. Try to look at the spirit of the talent, what we're trying to do. We have 10 classes. The monk talent tree wouldn't mean anything to you guys anyway, so we'll skip that one. We still have 10 others. Buckle up. We're going to go in alphabetical order, so if you're a warrior, you can go get a beer, come back a little later. DK. First DK tier is all about diseases. Outbreak is a current ability. It's up against Roiling Blood, which lets your blood boil act like pestilence. And the return, by popular demand, of Corpse Explosion. The way this works is if a target dies with your diseases on it, you can then target that corpse and blow it up. Next here, we have 3 survivability buttons. You can choose Lichborn, you can choose Anti-Magic Zone, or you can choose Bone Shield. We're hoping that the blood decays don't just say, oh, I have to have this, because the other 2 can be pretty useful as well. All right, level 45 is about movement and control. Death's Advance and Chilblains are current abilities that the DKs out there are probably familiar with. And then we have a new ability called Asphyxiate. You lift your target off the ground and strangle them. You'll see what we do with some of these talents is if you get Asphyxiate, it replaces Strangulate. It's kind of like a improved Strangulate. So you don't have both of them, you just have the more awesome version. All right, level 60 we have a healing tier. DKs have always been a little bit about self-healing, particularly the tanks. We still have Death Pact and Vampiric Blood in here, and a new ability called Death Siphon, which lets you to suck away a little bit of used shadow damage and heal yourself a little bit based on the damage dealt. Okay, level 75 is a really interesting tier. We introduced the concept of runic empowerment for Cataclysm with the idea of making sure that the rotations didn't feel too, we call it the metronome, when you're like, I know a rune's coming back now a rune's coming back now, and you can get to the point where you're just hitting 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we introduced runic empowerment to mix that up a little bit. Some players don't really care for the mechanic. They think it's too RNG. They want a little more control. You can make other criticisms about it. So we thought it was a great candidate to stick here as a talent. If you like it, choose it. If not, you have 2 other choices here. You can take the Runic Corruption, which just increases the rate you get runes back. Or this is a really modified Blood Tap, where now you can take a depleted rune and turn it into a death rune. And now, the final tier, level 90, is all about awesome crowd control. Gorfien's Grasp, probably the easiest way to talk about this is AE Death Grip. Yeah. Remorseless Winter is kind of similar to the Lich King's ability himself. It's kind of a replacement for Hungering Cold. We had trouble balancing Hungering Cold at the end with the instant nature, and we didn't think the cast time really went over very well. So here, you can still do control, but it takes a little while to stack that 5 stacks up and then stuns the target at the end. And then finally, Desecrated Ground here. When you stand within the area, you're also immune to crowd control effects. It's also worth noting that all 3 of these abilities do some amount of damage. You know, again, we want them to be apple-to-apples choices, where if you're picking one of these abilities, you're not going to say, well, I have to pick this one just because it does a trivial amount of damage.